Wow, this Nintendo Switch 2 technology is even more impressive than I thought. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are going to be talking even more about Nintendo Switch 2. Now, we've already had discussions about the graphical abilities of the Nintendo Switch 2. We've seen some different third-party games like Cyberpunk, Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring, and we've seen how they've played in comparison to their PlayStation 4 counterparts, and we've seen that they look and run noticeably better. So that leads many of us to believe that the console is indeed somewhere between a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation 5. But then we've also heard about games like Fortnite apparently, now this is according to a leaker, so it's not 100% confirmed, but apparently Fortnite will have a 1080p 120 FPS mode or a 4K mode. And so that's impressive. This idea of another game having a 120 FPS mode or a 4K mode. We've talked about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond having a 4K 60 FPS mode or a 1080p 120 FPS mode. And just thinking about these levels of frame rate or resolution, it's just not even close to possible on last-gen hardware. The fact that the Switch 2 is a hybrid console, something you can play in handheld mode, but also dock, and you can get this level of fidelity, is very impressive in my opinion. But today I find myself even more impressed by Switch 2 after having read through the Ask Developer series on the hardware, and also seeing some recent discoveries as well that people did not notice initially that tell us even more about this technology for Switch 2, a lot of it having to do with the controllers. And I think once you put it all into perspective, the Switch 2 is actually far more innovative than people are giving it credit for, and it has me saying, wow, I'm very impressed, I'm very excited, and I think when we actually consider what this is all going to mean, we are going to have noticeably better experiences, not just visually, but also with different varying quality of life features and how the games feel on Switch 2. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches on June 5th, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be greatly appreciated. Now here's just a reminder that today I'm recording this on April 23rd, hours away before April 24th, when a lot of people here in North America will be able to pre-order their Switch 2 consoles. There are different places doing midnight pre-orders, so things are getting kind of hectic here. It's kind of crazy. And we even heard something really interesting from the president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa. You see here the Japanese tweet, but I'll just go ahead and look at the summary here by stealth. So apparently, President Shuntaro Furukawa had to apologize because of the extreme level of demand for Switch 2 in Japan. They have more than 2.2 million pre-order applications on the My Nintendo store. It has far exceeded their expectations, and so to be clear here, this is not pre-orders in retailers and such, like how a whole bunch of retailers are opening up here in North America. This is just the My Nintendo store application where you go into the wait list. That's a really big number. But to put it into perspective, as Stealth says here, Japan, for the original Switch, had sold 330,000 consoles in its first weekend. So just think about that for a moment. Across all the pre-orders and different retailers and such, Switch 1 had sold 330,000 on the first weekend. And now, Switch 2 hasn't come out yet. Hasn't been its first weekend. We're not even talking about pre-orders across the board. Just the application for that wait list on the My Nintendo Store page for Japan is at 2.2 million. This is a staggering difference in demand. It's hard to fully quantify because we don't know what the level of pre-orders are overall in Japan with all the different retailers involved. But it goes to show that the demand this time around is significantly higher, and the pricing situation doesn't seem to have quelled that in any way. Now, something else to point out about this is that the brand of Nintendo back in 2017 versus the brand of Nintendo now are at two totally different levels. This level of demand initially doesn't necessarily guarantee that Switch 2 is going to sell better than Switch 1 long term, but it is a really good start. And it also goes to show that it may be difficult to secure your Switch 2 pre-order. So I'm letting you all know now, be prepared. But let's now move on to talking about the tech in Switch 2. So I found this message from Shuhei Yoshida very interesting, and I just want you guys to keep it in mind as we go throughout this video, because they basically said that Nintendo is no longer really innovating the way they used to. To me, it was a bit of a mixed message from Nintendo, Yoshida explained. In a sense, I think Nintendo is losing their identity, in my opinion. For me, they are always about creating some new experience, like designing hardware and games together to create something, an amazing new experience. And so there's been this conversation that Nintendo's not really innovating much with Switch 2, but I don't really agree. I think when you consider everything, they're innovating in all the right ways. I think Nintendo actually was more innovative with the Nintendo Switch than they were with the Nintendo Wii. Now hear me out here. This is because I think what Nintendo did with the Switch 1 changed gaming for the better more so than what the Wii did. Yes, the Wii introduced motion controls, which were a very new thing, and they have since been adopted in some games moving forward. But with Nintendo Switch, Nintendo found a way to put together a piece of hardware that accommodates so many different playstyles. And now we have the Switch 2. Nintendo's never just given us a number for the next new console. But I think this showcases what Nintendo accomplished with Switch 1. They created a new standard of gaming for themselves, they innovated with Switch 1, and now they're building upon that. And so I guess you could say by simply building upon it, they're not really innovating as much this time. But as we go through, I think you might start to see where I'm coming from here. So here in this first part of the Ask Developer series on the Nintendo Switch 2 hardware, Kawamoto said this: "The Switch 2 system's improved processor performance has allowed us to realize new types of gameplay that haven't been seen before. To give you some examples, in Donkey Kong Bonanza, you can experience the exhilaration of being able to destroy anything you want in the game without restrictions. In Mario Kart World, all courses are now connected seamlessly in a single world, so you can drive from one course to the next. You could say that one of the key features of Switch 2 is its expanded processing capability, which has made these new gameplay experiences possible." And so here it's being highlighted that simply by having improved processing power, we can have games that are doing things that could not be done before, at least by Nintendo. And so I go back to the Switch 1, and I think about what Nintendo accomplished with Breath of the Wild. That changed how we look at open world games moving forward. Or with Mario Odyssey, that revived the 3D platforming genre. And so what I love so much about the Switch is that Nintendo created an ecosystem with the Switch where the hardware accommodated so many different playstyles with motion controls, handheld mode, tabletop mode, dock mode, and everything in between. But they were also put in a scenario where they could simply focus on innovating with the games themselves. For all of you watching, which game do you think is more innovative? The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, or The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? I think most will agree Breath of the Wild changed gaming, evolved the Zelda series more so than Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword was forced to use the motion controls. They tried to build the game around that to showcase the abilities of the Nintendo Wii and the Motion Plus attachment, and it was a fun experience. Not saying it wasn't a good game, it was. But during those times with the Wii, a lot of it felt like they were being different for the sake of being different, as opposed to focusing more so on just coming up with the most fun and interesting way to evolve our gaming experiences. And so you look at Donkey Kong Bonanza, and we're seeing a level of destruction and memory of this destruction that we've never seen in any other prior game. The fact that you can pull up a 3D map that retains the level of destruction you've had throughout your experience on that level, and it shows it all, that's mind-boggling to me. And then with Mario Kart World, the game runs at 60 frames per second in an open world, something we would not see on Nintendo Switch, and it has a higher fidelity, and there's some pretty impressive visuals. And to my understanding, this can still be done with 2 players. In 4 players, it goes down to 30 FPS, but the fact that we can have experiences like this on Switch 2 shows incredible improvements here that were not possible beforehand. But it goes beyond processing power, of course. And so I'll just read this part from Dota here. That's right, if I can add to that, Switch is a dedicated gaming console that packs in the best parts from Nintendo's previous consoles. You can play in both TV mode and handheld mode. The controllers are detachable and have various built-in sensors. I do think that the form factor has lots of potential still. However, I feel that the way people play games in their daily lives is gradually changing, so one of our challenges this time was to delve deeper into this aspect. With a new, more powerful console leveraging the original concept of Switch, we believe that wonderful gaming experiences await players. So the key thing I want everyone to focus on here is how they're thinking about how people's daily lives are gradually changing and how they deal with that with the Switch 2. So let's now talk about the Joy-Cons here, because there's something said here that I think a lot of people have overlooked. Kawamoto: we redesigned everything from scratch for Joy-Con 2, the controllers for this system. Compared to the Joy-Con controllers for Switch, the control sticks are larger and more durable, with smoother movement. We've also made Joy-Con 2 bigger to match the larger console. And so the big thing that I think is said here is that they say the control sticks are larger and more durable with smoother movement. So this durable part, I believe Nintendo low-key just confirmed that stick drift or Joy-Con drift have been done away with, at least to a reasonable degree, because it's impossible to do away with it entirely. Like, even Hall effect controllers can eventually drift, but the idea is that they are far more durable and will last longer. And so here they talk about how the control sticks are larger and more durable. And so everyone has actually been putting out these different articles saying, oh, Nintendo doesn't have Hall effect, there's going to be stick drift. And when Nintendo's responded, they can't say they're using Hall effect because they literally are not using Hall effect. They've come up with their own new means for these control sticks. But what they have said is that they are more durable. So I think that's huge. But let's talk about something else here they say about the Joy-Cons. Kawamoto: also, you can't tell just by looking at it, but HD Rumble 2 for Switch 2 has been changed to allow for a wider variety of vibrations. The HD Rumble in the Joy-Con controllers for Switch was able to create different sensations of touch, but because of the size of the Joy-Con itself, we weren't able to make the vibration as strong as in the controllers for the Nintendo GameCube. However, the HD Rumble 2 that's installed this time not only provides stronger vibration, but also feels more realistic and has quicker response times. This, what they're saying about HD Rumble 2, sounds so exciting. The fact that now, because the Joy-Cons are bigger, we can get stronger vibrations, so we can notice more of these higher detailed levels of vibrations, but also it feels more realistic and has quicker response times. The HD Rumble is better. And we've actually heard from some different impressions from the Nintendo Switch 2 Experience events and press events that the HD Rumble 2 feels really good in these different games. In Drag Drive, you can feel the texture of the tires as you're pulling at them or trying to stop and turn around. Or in Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, if you're using the mouse mode where you're using two separate controllers, one, you're getting rumble in a mouse, which is not really an experience you see too often, but also two, as you shoot Samus's arm cannon, you can feel the charge up shot, and when you shoot, you feel that release, but you only feel it in the right Joy-Con because that's your right arm. Or in Donkey Kong Bonanza, you can feel the difference as you're pummeling through all the different types of terrain. And so the overall conversation with HD Rumble 2 is that it seems like it's something that will rival what we've seen with the haptic feedback from Sony's PS5 controller. Is it better? Is it worse? We're not sure, but it's certainly a noticeable improvement over Switch 1, and that's a great thing. But something I want to go back to here is how I mentioned how with the Joy-Cons, when you're playing Prime 4, you can feel the rumble in separate controllers depending on the situation. And so that's a unique experience you won't get anywhere else because it's a two-controller experience. Of course, I will also say that yes, the Switch 2 Pro controller has HD Rumble as well, HD Rumble 2 to be specific for those who are concerned that it doesn't have it. But it's very exciting to think about these improvements and differences we'll see with the Switch 2 Joy-Cons. But let's talk a little bit more about the mouse controls here. So Kawamoto says, it wasn't in the initial planning, but when I was playing a PC game using a mouse, the idea struck me that maybe the Joy-Con controllers could also be used as a mice. Switch 2 was originally designed to support a wider range of games by improving the system's processing speed. So with that in mind, I thought it'd be better to be able to play interesting games that require a mouse. Implementing mouse control that's widely used nowadays in the Joy-Con controllers isn't that costly, and I think that's exactly what lateral thinking of withered technology is all about. I thought it was a really great idea, so I proposed it to the technology development department, and they were like, oh, we've been thinking about that for ages. And so this is very interesting for a variety of reasons. They found a way to incorporate technology that's been around for years, but in a way that isn't costly, and will actually dramatically improve experiences here. And so whenever I hear these discussions about, oh, Switch 2 isn't innovative, I feel like everyone's overlooking the mouse controls, which Nintendo has been pushing. They have multiple games that are showcasing the mouse controls, and the impressions have been incredible, especially with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. The level of speed and precision changed the experience. You think about the PC Master Race, how there's always this conversation about how mouse and keyboard is the best way to play so many different games. But with Switch 2, within this form factor where you can play games in the living room in docked mode, or on the go in handheld mode, or you have tabletop mode where you can do a variety of different things, you now have this mouse mode feature where you can play all these different games in different ways, and you can kind of bring in a little bit of that PC style of gaming. But we also think about how the Switch 2 is capable of having 120 FPS gaming as well, and that level of fluidity and smoothness from the frame rate with the speed and precision of the mouse controls can lead to some fantastic experiences here. And there's going to be a lot of PC style games you will now be able to take with you on the go in this very comfortable form factor. So to me, that's definitely innovation. But let's go a step further here. It's not just about bringing in PC gaming experiences that were not possible in handheld hardware before, or just not really super feasible, I should say, in a comfortable manner. But there can also be new experiences, because the Switch 2 isn't doing mouse and keyboard, it's doing mouse and Joy-Con. So it's almost incorporating that comfort of dual analog controls we've been enjoying for generations, but also bringing in the mouse, while also incorporating HD Rumble 2. And so when you combine all these different things with the form factor of Switch 2, where you can play games in handheld mode, or in docked mode, or in tabletop mode with that better kickstand and that better screen, they are building upon what they established with Switch, giving developers even more different ways to put in their games and giving them opportunities to come up with some new styles of gaming. Let's now talk about that Switch 2 Pro Controller, because some really amazing things have been said about this as well. Kawamoto. First things first, the Joy-Con controllers and Pro Controller from Nintendo Switch can be used with Nintendo Switch 2. But now we've created a controller that's evolved further. Aside from the color, the Switch 2 Pro Controller may look indistinguishable from the previous controller at first glance, but it was also redesigned from scratch. In particular, the left and right control sticks are quieter and don't make noise, even when they are moved quickly to the edge. Also, they glide very smoothly, so we've taken to calling them smooth gliding sticks. And so this is actually another interesting innovation. The Switch 2 Pro Controller is quiet. They say they don't make noise. So if you're playing in a room where someone else is sleeping or does not want to be disturbed, having a controller like this is actually extremely beneficial. It's adding to this ability of Switch 2 to be something that's very adaptive to the many different play styles and living experiences for different people. Moving on to his next part said by Kawamoto. The grip handles this time were designed with reference to the Nintendo GameCube controller, with the base of the grip made thinner to give the fingers more space. We removed the seam around the grip part of the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller so it feels better to the touch. We refer to them as seamless grips internally. So this is a subtle thing, but I really like that they made this change, because I will tell you, with my Switch Pro Controller, I didn't realize this was an issue, but now that they pointed it out, yeah, I do remember at different times kind of feeling that seam. And now they're trying to emulate that smoothness from the grips of the GameCube controller, which I always felt were one of the best controller grips ever. And they've incorporated it into the Switch 2 Pro Controller, and there are no seams, at least around where you're holding. And so that's something that I can really appreciate. I love that attention to detail. And also, by the way, Switch 2 Pro Controller has an audio jack, which was my main criticism of the controller throughout the entire Switch era. But one more neat thing I'll point out that people have noticed. And that's that the Switch 2 Pro Controller has an improved charging time. The battery life, approximately 40 hours, is the same as the Switch 1 Pro Controller, but the charging time is almost half. The charging time for Switch 1 Pro Controller was 6 hours. For Switch 2's Pro Controller, it's 3.5. So that's another really nice improvement in the Switch 2 Pro Controller. And so this may seem like a subtle change, but I think it's an important one, because sometimes you're going to put your controller to charge, and having a shorter charge time means more time to play the game, less time that you need to wait. And I think it just overall contributes to the level of innovation and improvements we're seeing with Switch 2. The technology is impressive, and it does wow me. I am very excited for this console. The more and more we learn about this console and the games, the more excited I get. And June 5th cannot come any sooner. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.